Hey, thanks for checking out this episode of the Lake Effect Podcast. Today we're going to talk with a young lady who knows just about everything there is to know about the Marblehead Lighthouse.
My name's Sue Hartman. I'm from Marblehead. My husband's family's been here for 3 generations. I've only been here since the late 70s.
Okay. So you spent a lot of time at the Marblehead Lighthouse, is that correct?
Yes. My in-laws joined the Lighthouse Society right after it started in the early 2000s. And since then, they've gotten older and passed on. And so my husband and I have kind of taken their place. And over the last 10, 12 years, we've done a number of different things with the Lighthouse Society. Everything from social media to websites to my husband's the current vice president. So all kinds of different things.
Are you telling me you got stuck with it?
No, it was my choice. My father-in-law first started asking me to do their website, and then slowly we just kind of kept adding more jobs on.
I've heard a lot of things about the Marblehead Lighthouse. One tourism-related official told me that the Marblehead Lighthouse is the single most photographed structure in the state of Ohio. What do you think about that?
We've heard that also. And as we look at social media, there are a number of different sites that keep posting our lighthouse, and even some of the national lighthouse sites will use our lighthouse quite often. So it does bring, they're talking about over 1 million people per year to our lighthouse. So
Right.
There's a lot of people coming.
And for people that may not know, the lighthouse is located basically at the very tip of the Marblehead Peninsula on Lake Erie.
Yes. And it faces out. You can see Kelly's Island. You can see over to Cedar Point. It's a great place to view the lake. It's one of the few places that there's public access to the lake shore.
Okay. One thing I have noted about the Marblehead Lighthouse is not the lighthouse itself, but the park is open year-round, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
It is. And pretty much any time I go there, there's somebody there. Whether it's early in the morning, late at night, summer, winter, doesn't matter. So at night we have a lot of night fishermen. This year with all the different astronomical events, we've had a lot of people taking northern lights, the meteor showers. They've been there in the evenings just to photograph whatever's going on with the stars. So it's a great place for stargazing as well, because the only light that's on is the lighthouse itself, but there's no parking lots, there's no other ambient light around. So it's a great place to go take a look at the stars.
Sue, what can you tell me about the Marblehead Lighthouse? I have heard that it's pretty old.
It's the oldest continuously operating on the Great Lakes. It is not the oldest, but the oldest that's still in operation and has been continuously. It was built in 1821. It was lit in 1822. It was built by some local stonemasons, and we're not quite sure where the stone came from. We know it's somewhere around the area, but we're not sure which quarry because there were no commercial quarries at the time. However, there is a small remnant of a quarry on our property that it may be where it came from because it would be logical to be the closest place. And you can visit that on the way out of the park.
I read somewhere, maybe an article or a book, that the lighthouse was constructed, of course, by hand by 2 men and 2 teenage boys in a period of about 6 weeks.
I think it's close. We had an archivist who looked into this, and she actually came up with a little different numbers.
Okay.
What our archivist has found was there was a Sandusky stonemason, William Kelly, and 6 assistants using locally quarried limestone. There was a younger boy there, and it was done very quickly. It was done in the fall of 1821 in under 2 months.
That's amazing.
I know, if you look at what was accomplished then compared to what we go through now, and it doesn't get done that fast, ever.
You mentioned some renovations around the turn of the century, so it doesn't look now the way it looked when it was constructed?
Correct. Originally it was about 15, 20 feet lower, and the light didn't go out that far.
Because?
Just because of the curve of the earth, it would only go so far.
Okay.
So they wanted, because of the increased shipping, to increase the distance that the light would go out. So in order to do that, you had to raise it up to get over the curve of the earth. So they added another section to it, and you can see where that is. There's like a line where it goes from a conical shape to more of a straight cylinder shape. And what they had to do was put a brick column through the center of the conical portion of the lighthouse, and they had to take it back down a little bit because they couldn't go up any higher. It would go to a point. They needed it to be a little broader. So they tore it down a little bit and then built it back up, but more of a cylinder shape. And then a couple years later, they acquired from the Erie Landlight in Erie, Pennsylvania, their lantern room, which is the top metal portion, because their lighthouse had been decommissioned and we needed one. So they just went and got that one and put it on top of our lighthouse. And then we got a Fresnel lens not long after that. The Fresnel lens at the time was the most up-to-date method of lighting that the lighthouses were using, but ours is kind of unusual, and it's a bivalve. So every time it rotates, it flashes twice, one on each side.
Okay.
And that lasted until the mid-1900s, when it got replaced with an incandescent bulb, and then eventually it got replaced with the current LEDs that we have now.
Really? So early on, it was the light source was whale oil?
It was. And then we believe it went to kerosene because of the cost of the whale oil. And then the lighthouse was the first place on the peninsula that actually had electricity. They put a generator there and got electricity for the lighthouse before the rest of the peninsula got any power.
I read that during the Cold War, for some few years, the lighthouse had a small structure built on the top for shelter, and there were actual civic groups, like, for instance, scouts, that would stay on the lookout for Russian submarines.
And that's right. If you come into our museum, we have a couple pictures, and the lighthouse had it was painted black at the top where it's red now, but there was like a little enclosure up there because just like on the East Coast and the West Coast, they were very afraid of people coming in, and especially, boats from other countries invading our waters.
So during those early decades, I understand that the lightkeeper actually was also responsible for keeping an eye out for ships in trouble.
That's correct. And actually, Marblehead's one of the first places in the area that had a life-saving station. And on our property today, you can see a replica of that station. The original station is where our Coast Guard is today, but you can see a lifeboat that they would have used, as well as some of the equipment that was used at that time.
Like a big giant rubber lifeboat with a couple Mercuries on it?
No, these were wooden boats, and they had several men in there that would just row out to wherever it is. They also had equipment that could shoot lines out over the bow of the stranded ship in order to they were called breeches buoys, to bring the men back off the ship without having to go out into the surf that was kind of dangerous at that point.
At the lighthouse, or next door to the lighthouse, this life-saving station was constructed. Was that by you guys, the Historical Society?
It was all built by the Historical Society through donations and through gift shop sales and memberships, and civic groups have given us some money. But that's one of the things that the Friends of the Lighthouse, or the Marblehead Lighthouse Historical Society, uses their money for.
I know people have asked me before when I've taken them to the lighthouse. They are confused because there's a keeper's house down the road about a mile or so, but there's also a keeper's house at the lighthouse. What can you tell me about that?
That might be one of the other questions that people ask all the time. I really wish the one on Bayshore Road was called the Keeper's Homestead instead of the Keeper's House. Yes, it was the first two, maybe three Keeper's House, but it was their homestead. The Walcotts had that before he became our lighthouse keeper, and that was his farm. That was his family house.
So it was his private residence.
Correct.
Not the official residence.
Correct.
Okay.
But on the property, the one that you see today, the keeper's house that's there, that's actually the second one. There was another not as well constructed building closer to the water that the first few keepers had stayed in. By the late 1800s, they replaced it with what you see today.
Is this the one that I read was kind of crappily built and kind of fell apart?
It did.
Uh-oh.
And again, if you come into the Lighthouse Museum in the keeper's house, there's a picture that'll show you. And it had like a stone building and a stone wall and some other outbuildings that you won't see today.
I read that some years back, maybe in the 70s, the Marblehead Fire Department had actually stacked bales of hay around the foundation and were preparing to burn the house to the ground, the keeper's house next to the lighthouse, for practice. Have you heard that story?
We have, and that's where the Marblehead Lighthouse Historical Society began. There were a group of local people who got together and went to our state legislature and said, we need to save this building. And at the last minute, they got a stay put on the destruction of the house. And at that point, ODNR kind of changed how they were taking care of the property. They already had ownership of the property, but it got changed into a state park at that point. And the Historical Society was allowed to remain or allowed to create an organization that would help support education and betterment for the park.
In your knowledge of lighthouses around the United States, the Marblehead Lighthouse, I feel, is unique because it's one of the few operating lighthouses that you could actually visit all day, every day, year-round, and also one of the few that you could actually get inside. Is that true?
My husband and I have traveled to quite a few lighthouses, and we've only been able to climb a few. Probably about 30% of the ones that we've seen we can climb. Our property is open every day. The lighthouse itself to climb is just Memorial Day to Labor Day from noon to 4. And we hear a lot of people say we've come and it's closed, and it is the rest of the day, but during the summer season we're very busy, and a lot of days we sell out every tour. But it is nice that you can still go in it and that it's still in good shape, because we've gone to several that you could go in, but it's not safe to go in.
Do you give the tour to the top of the lighthouse? Are you involved in that?
Actually, the lighthouse is divided into two groups. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources owns the park. They own the lighthouse. Then the Coast Guard is a third party involved. They own the light. And then I'm part of the Marblehead Lighthouse Historical Society, and we are the ones who are like the friends group, the support group.
Okay.
So we sell the tickets. So I would sell a ticket, but somebody from ODNR would be the one who would take you up to the top of the tower.
All right. Even though you're not the one that does the official tour, do you spend the season or the summer peppered with questions from people?
Oh, of course. And, we're the people who are selling the tickets, so we're the first line of questions and answers of what's going on. And probably 95% of the people don't realize that there's two different groups going on, and so they look at us as all being park employees instead of park employees and park volunteers.
Okay. What's maybe the number one and the number two question that you get from people throughout the season?
A lot of it is, what are the landmarks nearby, which is like Kelly's Island and Cedar Point.
Oh, they want to know what they're looking at.
Right.
Okay.
And in the last year, we put little plaques at the top of the lighthouse that as you're up there, you can look out and it'll tell you it's, 5 miles to Kelly's Island, or, 10 miles to another reference point to help with that.
The stairs going to the top, it's not your typical modern set of stairs. What can you tell me about that, and how do people react? Some people.
Some people are a little afraid of heights, so this might be intimidating to them. They're open cast iron steps. They're the originals that were there from the early 1900s. There have been wooden steps before, but when they modified the lighthouse, these cast iron steps have been put in. But they're spiral, and if you look down, you can see all the way through them. So for some people, that is a little scary. And there's 77 of them to get to the top. So some people are a little out of breath by the time they get to the top.
Where could people find out more about the Marblehead Lighthouse if they wanted to look it up?
So if you go online, it's marbleheadlighthouseohio.org is our website. We're also on Facebook. You can look up Marblehead Lighthouse Historical Society. And even if you Google us, we're usually the first links that you get for the lighthouse. And if you email us, we'll be glad to answer your questions. If you go on Facebook or on Instagram and you message us, we'll get back to you that way
Really?
too.
Do you get a steady stream of questions and inquiries from people that haven't been here but they want to come visit?
When I look at all our analytics for our website, we get quite a few visitors every month, especially in the summer,
Okay.
taking a look at our information.
Hey, Sue, thank you so much for visiting with me today and talking about the Marblehead Lighthouse. Someday, I hope to see you somewhere around the lake. Thanks for joining me today for this episode of the Lake Effect Podcast. I'm your host and producer, James Proffitt. Executive producer is Chris Pfeiffer. If you have questions or want to learn more about Lake Effect, visit wgte.org/Lake Effect. Until then, I'll see you somewhere around the lake.
WGTE. Voices around us.
WGTE is supported in part by the American Rescue Plan Act funds allocated by the City of Toledo and the Lucas County Commissioners and administered by the Arts Commission.